751A tonight. I don't usually use this too much on AM, but I'm using it tonight. I hope you're copying
from
okay.
3.5 megahertz.
400 watts of carrier, peaking at legal limit. There's a lot of QRM, however, so maybe that's... Hope you guys are hearing me okay. Hi, Bruce. Well, I used to use balance line years ago, but I'm all coax now. I still have my tuners, homebrew balanced tuners and all of that, but I just don't... everything's coax now. I've got... This antenna also is a 160 wires on it, also single feed point, but 2 dipoles, one for 160, one for 80. Full-size half-wave dipoles, and then I got a couple of towers here, and Yagis on 10 through 20, and phased verticals for 40 meters. But when I could only have one antenna, that was a good antenna, 135-foot flat top. And it used that for quite a few years. But, you know, there's issues with open wire, balance line. Rain is one of them. Moisture, then you're riding the tuner to keep your SWR low. And there's issues, but they can be overcome to a certain extent. So, I wonder... hope you're hearing this 751A all okay. I haven't used this rig in many years. Did a lot of modifications for AM on this thing back in the day. So over to you, Bruce. And if there's just the three of us, thanks for letting me in. W2SDR, over.
Hey, good afternoon there, Frank. W2SDR in the group from W2XR. We also have Jerry in here, WA2FNQ, and I think there may have been a breaking station. I thought I heard another station trying to call in. You're putting in a powerful signal here, Frank. If you want, you can cut back on the electric bill. You're literally pinning the carrier level meter on the R390A this afternoon. Doesn't get any better than that. You're the channel master. And Jerry's signal has come up substantially on that last go-around, too. I meant to comment about that, and Dave is really putting in a good signal as well. There is a lot of QRM. I had to narrow up the bandwidth of the IF on the R390 from where I normally leave it, which is 16 kilohertz, to get that real wideband, HiFi, AM quality. I had to narrow it down to 8 kilohertz. I'm still hearing some chatter, some adjacent channel interference. But let me take a pause for a breaker, and then we'll pass this number over to Jerry, and then from there it goes up to Dave. And Dave, I wanted to make a quick comment before I forgot. Talking about the primer, you had mentioned that this particular chemistry professor you had in college, that one of his projects was to determine if the atmosphere upon I guess a fission bomb would create or would turn to nitrous oxide, I think you said. I seem to remember that one of the fears that the physicists had towards the very, very, well, I guess towards the matter of days, I think it was, before the actual Trinity test at Los Alamos, was whether the atmosphere itself would actually ignite. And I think Teller had done some calculations, and he determined quite correctly that that would not be the case. But the same situation came up again when the physicists were ready to actually deploy the first workable fusion device, which was, I think, again, the Castle Bravo shot in 1952, which yielded 15 megatons. And they were concerned again that now, because of the incredible heat from the fusion reaction, would it actually ignite the atmosphere? But obviously that turned out not to be the case. Anyway, let me take a pause for the breaker, and then the breaker, you pick it up and turn this number over to Jerry, WA2FNQ. This is W2XR standing by. Now, I must be hearing things this afternoon. Anyway, Jerry, you pick it up. WA2FNQ and the group. This is W2XR.
Yeah, there was a breaker, but he was way down in the mud. Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, okay, I didn't hear anything that time, so very good. Hello, Frank. How you doing? You're strapping in here. Everybody's doing a fine business job. It's afternoon. Yeah, I got my oil burner in the background here. Let me get rid of some of this low end until that thing shuts off. Well, very good. Well, anyway, Bruce, I must say the open wire feeder worked out fine over my from when I was at my parents' house. I had absolutely no problem with it, and I got in kind of a discussion with one other guy. I know he was like, "Oh, I'll never use open wire feed again. It radiates all over the place." I'm like, "No, not so. You know, if you properly balance it, you know, you won't have any problems." And I don't know if you remember where I had the antenna tuner mounted in my parents' house. It was on the wall of my dad's shack, but it was on the back side of the wall. And there was an unshielded telephone line that ran right past it. And I'll tell you something, I never had any RF problems with that. At that time, what we were running, like about 500, 600 watts of AM. There was absolutely no problem. So if you properly balance the thing, it really works like a charm. Problems either with rain or snow, because the width between the feeders, I guess, was enough. I guess I'd have about an inch and a half spacing. And that didn't seem to get bothered by originally my dad had the first thing he got it when it was a little JN and I didn't have my license, 300 ohm open wire line, and that was a pain in the rear. That settle on it, and your SWR would change, and so he switched it over to this 400 that he got. It was probably, I think it was made by Saxon or somebody, and that worked very well until the time I put my AM transmitter on the air. And then there was, you'd find pieces of the feed line actually vaporized. It was bad. So that's when I put up my homebrew stuff. Because I kept melting sections of the other one. Anyway. But yeah, routing in the open wire feed partly over here is a bit of a problem. And it was just easier to do it with coax, so I just started with coax. 29 years. Maybe someday I'll change it out. There's enough other projects around here, and unfortunately, I'm getting a little behind with things. So, anyway, over to you, Dave. N9PDF and the gang. This is W2FNQ.
WA1SOV.
I think that is Pete, WA1SOV. Perfect timing. You may take my place while I go prepare Indian cauliflower for dinner. Is there anyone else besides SOV? Not in Hoyd. I have a few comments that will keep them brief. Frank, the 751A sounds about as good as the N9. make a house call, bring me the tuner you don't want, your home-built one, especially if it'll work on 160. And I will shower you whatever one you want out of the cellar, including Chateau de Chem, if you know what that is, because I don't have hard liquor equal to yours. I have some aged port, whatever. But that has marvelous audio. So I also noticed the weather issues with Ladder One. You know, I twist it, turn it while I'm talking, it's okay. So the simplest way to think about this, if you, at resonance, depending on the geometrical configuration, the antenna goes from, you know, a free space dipole, which is 52 ohms, to a shortened vertical, which is close to 0. And if you decide to work at off resonance, that real plus imaginary impedance, let's say it's 50 ohms plus 0 j ohms, so to speak, with the feed line will be transformed because it will be in standing way. So the current and the voltage varies depending on the frequency and the length until it gets to the back of prime mover, as they used to tell me in engineering, with a transmitter. So you can get a very short protocol to work on anything if you transfer the impedance back to the transmitter. What's the rub? The rub is that you put 100 watts in your transmitter into a resistive load, you might be lucky to get 5 watts to the antenna. So the losses can be high, if not astronomical. And then the radiation efficiency, which is different from just plain old power into a load, you're modeling over real ground, and that's beyond my expertise. So we're really going to put power into human tissue, which luckily was mostly resistant. Anyway, SOV, Pete, good to hear you in here. I will be back hopefully in 5 minutes. I got to grind up some coriander, chop up some cauliflower, throw it in the frying pan, and let it steam for a half hour. I think it's W1SOV, Pete. Pick it up. Yep. And of course, it goes to the leader in the pack, Bruce.
Okay. Good afternoon, all. N9PDF and the group WA1SOV. Okay, Dave, thanks for letting me in here. Hello to Bruce, Dave. Who else is in here? Oh man, I don't know. Sorry, getting in here a little late. I just got home a little bit ago. I had to go to work today. And Jane is off gallivanting down to Washington. Dropped her off at the airport very early this morning. So that's the story. That storm did some antenna damage over here. We had ice all over everything, and about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch of ice. And this main antenna that I'm on is hanging low right now because one of the branches that holds up the center of the 160 meter dipole broke off the tree, and so the center support dropped way down. So the antenna is not all that high. Maybe about, 20, 30 feet at the center as opposed to 50, 60 that it normally is. I didn't get a chance to do anything about it today because I was not home, but maybe tomorrow. Anyway, Bruce, how you doing? W2XR in the group, WA1SOV. Yeah, how you doing, Uncle Pete? WA1SOV and the group from W2XR. Yes, indeed, the Barry White of the frequency. We have Jerry on frequency too there, Pete. He's certainly in here as well. And I guess with Jane gone over the weekend, there'll be a minimal amount of QRJ, huh? I just had to get that in. Oh, God. Boy, you're booming in, I'll tell you. If you hadn't mentioned that about the antenna, I would have never have known. Between you and Frank, W2SDR, you guys are clearly the channel masters. I mean, literally pinging the carrier level meter on the receiver this afternoon. Powerful signal. There may be something to be said about lowering the antenna for this type of a transmission distance. What do they call that? IVHS or something? I can't remember. Jerry knows what that stands for. But basically, you get I believe would be a higher angle of radiation as the height of the antenna is lowered. And there's probably an optimum height, because if you lower it too much, then the ground losses, of course, become excessive. But good signal. I guess you don't have the 813 rig on the air yet either. I'm really waiting to hear that transmitter back on the air, Pete. I want to hear that rig. And Frank, the audio sounds spectacular. Doesn't sound like a modified Icom at all, but like you said, you put a lot of mods into that thing to really improve the quality of the audio on AM. Sounds like a really good plate modulated transmitter at this end. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope I'm not getting talked out here. So let me throw this number over to you there, Uncle Jer. WA2FNQ with, I believe, N9PDF heading up to the kitchen, if I'm not mistaken. And the group, this is W2XR.
No, I get it. Then I turn it over to Jerry.
Go ahead, Frank.
Okay, thanks, Jerry. W2SDR, and good evening to Pete. Sounding good in here tonight. And to my location, running a little bit too much carrier. This rig drifts a little bit. The carrier does, and till it's warmed up. Just a little bit. It takes so little to drive this amplifier, so just a couple of watts one way or the other makes a big difference in the other end. An NVS antenna, I don't know, what it really is if anything less than a quarter wavelength off the ground. Actually better, eighth wavelength above the ground. Anything less than that. An eighth wavelength works pretty well on average for minimal ground losses as well as high angle of radiation. So it's good to have, I guess, an NVS, an NVIS type of antenna and a high dipole. But I always found the inverted V works the best. I've got my apex at about 75 feet. And I don't use a ballon or a choke. So I get feed line radiation, which I want, because it's at, it comes down the whole length of my 70-foot tower. So I get some vertical component, I would imagine. And I don't care what radiates, as long as it gets out there, okay, with a wire antenna. So I figure the high of the feed point and then horizontal going down to the ground points. It kind of gets a good compromise all the way around. And so that's my thought. Now I do use ballons, chokes, what have you on my Yagis. Okay, because, I don't want feed line radiation. It disturbs the pattern, the whole bit. But on a wire antenna, My idea of a balun is just an accident waiting to happen. So I run the high SWR at times, band edges on 160 and here on 80. And that's the death of most of the baluns is high SWR. And if the balun can take a high SWR, and if it gets hot, I don't want... heat's not a good thing. When you want most of that wattage to be going out into the air, not acting as a space heater. So that's my look on the NVIS stuff. Thanks for the comments on the old 751A. Appreciate it. Over to you, Jerry. And I guess David's sign. WA2FNQ in the group, W2SDR.
Very good, Frank. W2SDR. And the group, this is WA2FNQ. Excellent. Yeah, for regional stuff, an NVIS antenna would be rated. You could actually probably skip over stations that are in close to you. Where an NVIS antenna, that's exactly it. Near vertical extent, skywave radiator. I don't know. Yeah, it probably would be good to have both, Frank. And that would be the optimal thing. Right now it's a low piece of wire antenna, kind of close to the ground. I also thought about it. So you can get the center way the hell up, and that's where. I've run my dipoles both ways, with a balun, without a balun. I gotta admit, I had a 10-meter dipole. I don't know what to say about that. And then also over my parents' house, I had actually it was the same 10-meter vertical dipole, and I never used a balun with it. And it always seems to perform. Christ, when 10 meters, looking back in the good old days, I worked in South Africa on the damn thing, so I guess if it radiates and it radiates good, then it's a keeper. I'll get this thing together a little bit slowly. I don't feel like working out in the cold weather. So if we get some nice days, I'll get out and do a little playing around with where the antenna analyzer are. Right now, right at the top band edge, and that ain't no good. You gotta bring it down a bit. So anyway, I don't know, Frank, Dave went to take care of some cooking items. N9PDF, are you there? This is WA2FNQ. If not, take it away for Pete.
Yeah, I don't hear him yet. WA2FNQ from WA1SOV with the group. Very good. Well, Bruce,
You peaked minus 35 dBm over. Over what? Below 0 dBm. So that's quite a signal. Stronger than last week. Could be conditions, could be the antenna, I suppose. But for short distances, it probably does favor you guys a bit. But Frank is right up there, though he wasn't as strong as you, Bruce. I mean, you're just burying things today, so I don't know. Good signal, though, Frank. Right up there. And David was okay, too. Yeah, I'm kind of anxious to get outside and try to get this thing back up. Had some fun, particularly down on 160. You know, reaching out to the midsection of the country late at night. I don't know how the propagation will be with it low like this, but I'm not going to attempt it. Yeah, the E13s are over here. I didn't get a chance to do anything with them really this week. And we lost power during that storm last Sunday for most of the afternoon, but the generator kicked in. So everything was pretty good. And I remember that worry about the atmosphere blowing up, Bruce. I remember that concern. Oh, boy. Yeah, maybe tonight. And the fact that, you know, I'm batching it may give me more time to play with this 813 rig. So I may be in the shack for sure. I gotta go let the dog in and feed him, but I'll be back. So go ahead there, Bruce. I am interested in hearing that GPR 90 when you, not 90, the GPT 750 when you get it on. Man, I really wanted to find one of those, but there was one out there a number of years ago, but I think Bear snapped it up on me before I got my hands on one. That's a real classic rig. And I think you know the story that Al KOC was offering it to me, but he wanted more money than I wanted to pay because TUT was WA1TUT. I don't even remember Doug. He was bidding against me for a commercial enterprise he wanted it for. Anyhow, go ahead there.
Hello.
W2XR and the multitude at minus 35 dBm. This is WA1SOV.
WA1SOV and the group from W2XR. That's actually a very meaningful signal report because it tells me that the path loss right now between my QTH and yours, Pete, is 92 dB. And for some reason, I seem to remember 2 weeks ago, we actually had a lower path loss than that. Maybe something like 87 dB, which would indicate a received signal strength at your location of minus 30 dBm. That's a pretty strong signal. Minus 30 dBm is 30 dB below a milliwatt. Yeah, very good. I'm glad to hear we're hauling the mail up to Sandy Hook this afternoon. We had no issue with the ice storm at all last week. In fact, the weather got very cold. The rain had stopped substantially before the weather really got cold, so we had like minimal ice down here. In fact, I think the only ice that we saw was on some of the roads. The roads were a little slick. But I got to hand it to the town. They took a preemptive position here, and they put road salt down before the weather got really, really cold. So the roads really weren't bad, but we had no icing of the landscaping or my antenna or anything like that. So we survived. What did they call it? The storm was named Harper, if I'm not mistaken. Can you imagine the media is now assigning names to these snowstorms? It used to only be hurricanes. Now it's any kind of weather event. This was ice storm or snowstorm Harper. It's just nuts. I don't know. What can I tell you? I guess I'm old school about these things. But you may want to consider leaving that antenna at the height where it is right now, Pete, because between you and Frank, you guys are just killing it. Absolutely pinning the carrier level meter on the R390. Like I said to Frank, you guys may want to cut back on the transmitter power and save yourself a couple of bucks on the electric bill. I could throttle this thing much higher, but I don't for that very reason. Plus, I like to keep the parts as stress-free as possible, and there's no real advantage in terms of signal strength for me to, turn up the plate voltage much beyond where it is right now anyway. But the comment that was made earlier about having both a low height and a high height antenna in order to take advantage of the NVIS for the low height antenna, that would make perfect sense. I wish I had something like that, but that just ain't possible here. This antenna is going to stay where it is. W2SDR and the group. Frank, I wonder what kind of a signal I'm putting into your QTH in South Jersey this afternoon. W2SDR and the group. This is W2XR.
Anywhere between plus 40 and plus 60. The Icom here doesn't have a dBm meter like my SDR, and we need every bit of that power because we have a QRMer. So, unfortunately, in today's day and age in ham radio, the need for power is not necessarily just for making the contact. It's to get over the QRM. Or else you get pushed off the band, and that's a sad commentary. It's sad, but it is true. That's just the way of the world. So we got to live in this world, and we got to deal with it. So there you have that. Anyway, but you guys are coming through very well. I have an anomaly. I'm going to call in Ovonics. I've noticed this ever since I've got this unit. This is the 223, the little unit. I don't know if it replaced the 222, but it replaced in the Ovonics line an relatively inexpensive processor. And what I noticed with this thing, it's got a positive and negative peak meter on the face that registers the input to the unit. 2 bars that go across, one P for positive, one N for negative. And I noticed that every mic that I hook up to my 528E or any other mic preamp I have, when it goes into this thing, it always registers the negative peaks much higher than the positives, and I don't agree with it. So, and what I also notice, that I get more positive peaks out of whatever transmitter I'm driving with this thing if I reverse the input, the polarity going into the Ovonics unit. So it seems to me that the polarity is backwards in this thing. Now, of course, it's all a printed circuit board, and the XLR connectors, the in and out, are soldered right to the board. There's no wires. There's no chance, I don't think, of any polarity change, unless there's a secret menu you could get in to change the polarity, which I can't see. They don't say anything about that in the owner's book, but I'm going to call them, because there's definitely something wrong here. Because I never noticed this when I had my 222 in Ovonics unit. And if I run my mic preamp directly into the transmitter, it's not an issue. So there's something going on. Anyway, for now, I would just reverse the polarity and use it backwards. So I like the way it looks on the scope and likes the way it registers on my REA mod monitor. So that's that. That's my tale of woe with that. But other than that, the unit's great. Well, I understand what you're saying, Bruce, about naming the winter storms. Of course, they never did that before. That's all new. And you know why? It's the same reason why the media in general is like it is. It's all about ratings. As soon as they started giving ratings to news channels, that's when all hell broke loose. Because granted, they're going to be as dramatic as possible because they want people to watch. Objectivity has been out the window. As soon as they got Nielsen ratings, forget it. So that's my issue. So unless I was on the SDR, I could give a minus dB reading, but I'm going to do that. I might switch during the rest of you guys' transmissions and write down some dBm readings from the SDR. Okay, back around to you, Jerry. Your signal's holding up great, as is everybody's. So very nice conditions so far, so good. WA2FNQ in the group, W2SDR.
Okay, W2SDR. And the gang, this is WA2FNQ. Very good thing. Yeah, that's interesting about this, the 223. Curious as to what you find out about that thing. I meant to look that thing up last week and forgot about it, so we're still using the 222 here. 222 is basically a unit that you can put in line and get your broadcast station NRC compliant without any real hassle. And I think they're good little units. They do the job. And I don't know, been adding channel really takes the cake on all this stuff. I still don't understand the necessity of putting a recorder outside in a hurricane to record that. Yes, the wind is blowing. That's blowing really hard. But they like to name anything, rainstorms and whatever. But the channel is just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, there was one time one of the reporters out there, he looked like he was blown away, and two girls walked right behind him. You know, it's like the MSNBC leave Dave's back. If not, you got it, Uncle Pete. N9PDF. And the group of the WA2FNQ. WA1SOV.
Jerry, did you pass it to PDF?
Yes, he did, Dave.
Okay, well, now the linear is on, so that's good. Thank you, Jerry. WA2FNQ and N9PDF. I have the order as Bruce, Frank, Jerry, then me. So if there's someone else, you have to let me know, otherwise it goes back to Bruce. So I got the Indian cauliflower in, and it's finishing steaming. I'm having pot stickers, or Chinese dumplings, or as they say, guotia. And when we were trying to find out which way we were supposed to go, all sorts of places in Boston, more than once I asked some very pretty young Asian girl, and they were very adept at English. And when they answered and told me what the hell I was supposed to do, I would say either Sheshe or Bukachi. And they'd always smile. Anyway, I'm going to pass it back to Bruce. N9PDF.
Now it goes to Pete. Pete's in here now, Dave. Go ahead, Pete. Oh, Pete. Well, do you want to pick it up, Bruce?
Yeah, I'll take it, Frank. W2SDR in the group from W2XR with N9PDF, the resident gourmand, back on frequency. That's interesting about the 223, Frank. I did some research on that. I meant to tell you earlier, in fact. I did some research on that processor last weekend. It's a nice little toy, really is, and it's pretty obvious that Innovonics started with, I think, a fresh sheet of paper when they designed that thing relative to the 222. I think there's a USB port on the front panel of the 223, so you can actually go in there and configure the thing to your heart's content. And I did not know this, but it's actually a multi-band processor. I think it's a 3-band unit. Like you had mentioned earlier, or actually last week, the unit does have AGC, which the 222 does not have. That's interesting about how the thing is what may be incorrectly inverting the polarity, but you've got it nailed down. I mean, all you have to do is just flip the positive and the negative side of the balanced interface, either the input or the output, probably the input, I would assume, and you could invert the phase the way that you think it should be. My 222, I don't remember this. I don't think it inverts phase. I think what goes in comes out. And as you have heard me say in the past, I really like the 222. I think it's a great piece of equipment. And you'll find that when you give Innovonics a call, my experience will probably have been the same as what you will expect. The engineer who I spoke with, this was a number of years ago, was incredibly helpful. I mean, took his time and answered all my questions, you know, real kind of a laid-back California-type attitude, I remember. But I was really looking closely at the 223. They do make a rack mount frame for it. It's a 1RU high frame, and you can actually populate the frame with up to 3 of the 223 units. And of course it operates with a little outboard wall wart power supply, whereas the 222, the power supply is internal. I'm still thinking if I want to change out the 222. I've had really good luck with it, as you guys know. And I've tried several different processors here. The original one I had was an old RCA BA6A, which is just a basic, really peak limiting amplifier, all vacuum tube. And the price of those things became so valuable because all the recording guys want them that I sold it about 2 years ago. And it was a nice sounding limiter, but it just wasn't all that fast on the uptake. So occasionally a peak would get through and you'd find yourself hitting the baseline. So the BA6 has been gone for about a little over 2 years at this point. And then I also have an Orban 9100A, and I've got a Duro DAP 610. I had a DAP 310, but I sold it. I didn't like it at all. And I'm not impressed with the DAP 610, and I'm probably in the minority. I know most guys really like it. They find that it has very powerful control over the modulation of their transmitter. I never found that to be the case. Again, I found that peaks would slip through that the 222 would catch. And of course, with the Orban, that processor is very, very, well, what I should say is, in my opinion, and I think Bob Orban kind of alludes to this in the tech manual and the user's guide for his multiband processors, they're really designed not for this older generation of plate modulated transmitters, where you have very complex impedances within the modulator that can cause all kinds of overshoot and ringing issues. And although the 9100A is designed by user adjustment to provide overshoot control, I never found it all that effective. So I have the thing still wired into my patch panel, like the Duro DAP 610, but I just don't use them. I find that the 222, when I have it adjusted for basically 125% or greater positive going peaks with the asymmetry adjustment, I just never hit the baseline. Or if I do, it happens so rarely. I think it's a great piece of equipment. I don't hit it that hard either, Frank. I'm only running about maybe 6 dB of peak limiting. I don't like to really use tremendous amounts of peak limiting because that adds its own form of distortion, of course. But I am thinking about that 223. It would be interesting if you purchase it, and if you're not happy with it, if Innovonics will take it back. I think you said the physical interface on that thing for the audio I/O is XLR connectors. If I remember, on the 222, it's a screw terminal block on the back apron of the unit. So if I did get a 223, I'd have to add in XLR connectors. Pardon me. And with regard to the news, very, very interesting. I agree with what you said, Frank. Once the news became a ratings game, that was the end of it. Most people don't realize this. It's show business. Whether it's MSNBC or Fox News or CNN, it's show business. It's about ratings. And I think it's pretty obvious that all three of those networks are very dogmatic in how they present their viewpoint on the news. And they deliberately slant the presentation to favor the demographic that they're chasing. It's that simple. My guess is that Rachel Maddow or Brent Bayer or what's her name on Fox News, the blonde? How could I forget? Laura Ingraham, that's right. You know, they have to, they probably get some kind of an incentive payment for slanting their presentation to increase the maximum number of viewers so they can charge their advertising base the maximum amount. Just my viewpoint. The days of when Walter Cronkite or Peter Jennings or Huntley Brinkley or whoever you want to call it delivered really the news. And it was the news. It was everything. It wasn't just strictly what's going on in Washington or Roger Stone being indicted or whatever. It was the news. They really covered many different subjects. Those days are long gone. I don't know of any station that really presents the news, except for, I guess, the three networks like that any longer. And I really never watch the networks anymore anyway. Anyway, let me, who gets this thing? Jerry, I guess you pick it up. WA2FNQ in the group. This is W2XR.
I think I get it.
You do, Frank. Go ahead.
Okay. W2SDR in the group. Well, yeah, just, sticking on that topic for a minute. You can tell by the adjectives that they use. Well, on any of the cable news networks, they're very, opinionated adjectives. I find the best best international and national news is usually on your local TV station, because they don't devote the whole half hour to nothing but politics. They give you the gist of what's going on, and then they move on. And that's that. And really, local is what counts. Because that's really what affects our lives for the most part, is local events. Okay, that's enough of that. Let me see, what else? A lot of stuff to comment on. I bought my 223 Bruce from BSW. And it was B stock, which I guess means like opened, but not sold, or whatever it was. I got like a couple $100 off it. And I got it, and I would have never known it. There wasn't a fingerprint on it. Manual had never been opened, nothing. So I got a good deal. But I got it from BSW. And it is XLR in and out. Now, if you recall in the 222 owner's manual, they do state in that manual that if you have to reverse the polarity, do it on the output, not the input. The input it's very important that you have correct polarity on the input, because that determines the whole track of its positive peak limiting. So you have two tracks in that unit, after your audio gets in there, and that's positive peak limiting and negative peak limiting. And it's very important that is correct. Now, if you have to, because of your transmitter, modulator, what have you, to change the polarity, do it on the output. Now, they don't say anything like that in this 223. But these positive and negative bars that go across the display is the output of the unit. And, I've got enough stuff to hook up to it. I know what my polarity is. And there's something backwards about this. So I agree with you, Bruce. I've heard that before. They're very, very helpful on the phone. And I will call them, and we'll see what happens with that. Very interesting about the solid-state transmitters. I can see that these companies will not design anything for tubes any longer. I don't know any major broadcaster that's probably still using tube transmitters, just because of the energy efficiency alone. That's relegated to legacy. Would be my opinion in that area. So let me see what else. You were minus 40 dB, Bruce. Minus 55 for Jerry. I switched over to the Anon very quickly to measure that. Now that receiver is calibrated minus 70 dBm is the calibration point, and I guess that's for S9. Well, I guess that doesn't really make any difference, but it's accurately calibrated. There's no question. So very, very strong. I think I calibrated. I think I addressed just about everything. So, welcome back, dude. And over to you, Jerry. WA2FNQ. W2SDR in the group. Oh, God, this guy's really strong now.
Yeah, I hear that too.
He's obliterating Jerry.
The output. And there was a hot broke off get the circuit board inside, and I called him up and said, "Can you send me Bruce, I had a BA6 in the audio chain when I was at WGLI. We had that, and we also had for what it was worth, the Harris solid statesman, or Dave solid statesman. Kind of worked, but and we had an automatic, but I don't think we did anything. We usually just moved around on it. Anyway, let me pass it over to you, Dave. See how you're doing there. And then it goes to Pete, SOV, if you back to take care of the dog. Anyway, N9PDF from WA2FNQ.
Okay, Jerry, WA2FNQ, N9PDF. Well, my wife is eating stems from the baby spinach. She's that hungry, so I have to run upstairs. But my general quick summary of it is the movie network kind of explained an awful lot of what you were talking about. And if that didn't help you understand it, then it was Wag the Dog. And, it's almost hideous to think that that's it. So, Leni Lichtenstein, she was an incredible cinematographer who worked for Herr Hitler. And I've seen some of her movies early on in one of my history of the cinema, the only history of the cinema classes. And she was absolutely marvelous the way she could mix the audio and the images. So, I should have said this earlier. I don't quite understand the fascination with peak limiting or hitting the baseline. That's not something that's in kind of my DNA. So Frank or anybody, if they explain it to me, understand it. So I don't understand how the processors make all their magic. Anyway, yes, the local news does a much better job. Pete, if you're there, pick it up. I hear the timer going off, and I have to eat dinner. My wife is going to eat the cat. So I will catch you back probably in a half hour. N9PDF.
Pete, are you there, or are you still out there with the dogs? Okay, I guess I'll take it. Hang on just 1 second, guys. Just checking everything on the transmitter here. N9PDF and the group from W2XR. Leni Riefenstahl. That's a name I haven't heard in a couple of years. I think she just died relatively recently, within the last couple of years. I think the woman was like 102 years old. And the only film I ever saw that Leni Riefenstahl had directed was a classic. I think it was called Triumph of the Will from like 1936 or something. But that's another subject for another time. Yes, you guys are right about the phase should be changed at the input to the peak limiter and not the output. For example, my phase shift switch, if you will, is right at the output of my microphone preamp. Right now I'm in phase, and right now I'm out of phase, and you can clearly see the difference on the mod monitor. Wow, what a difference indeed. Hold on 1 second. Okay, now that's back in phase. Yeah, that would make perfect sense what you said, Frank. I also have provision here in the shack, not only for toggle switch selection of the phase to the input to the peak limiting amplifier, the 222, but on my patch panel I can invert the phase just by going to a different set of jacks. And everything is correctly phased with this transmitter here. So I hear what you're saying. Yeah, the Inovonic service was excellent. You're going to have a good experience, I would expect. Another company where I had really good after-sales service was Bellar, who makes my modulation monitor. I guess about 2 years ago, I get down into the shack and I fire everything up, and there's smoke coming out of the modulation monitor, and I said, okay, this is obviously not good. Well, I didn't get on the air that day. Take the mod monitor out of its cabinet, take the cover off, plug it in, and sure enough, there's a tantalum capacitor, a bypass capacitor on, I think it was the negative leg of the DC power supply, that had failed. It had shorted. And I cleaned everything up, and, you know, instead of like ordering the replacement from Newark Electronics or Dowkey or DigiKey rather, one of these other companies, I just gave Bellar a call and I said, you know, I've got your product. It's an AMM3A. Never had a problem. Could you, if you have it available, could you send me such and such part number? And I think they sent me like 3 of them. And they came like within a couple of days. They were really great about it. So it's a pleasure to do business with companies like that, especially where the purchase price of the equipment, of course, isn't cheap. But I remember too, Frank, you had mentioned that you had bought that 223 through Broadcaster Supply Warehouse, I think is the name of the company, BSW, and it was B Goods. Yeah, that may have just been a return that they made sure had no cosmetic blemishes, and of course made sure it met spec. And they repacked it and sent it out, and nothing wrong with buying equipment like that at all. In fact, I remember once reading that sometimes when you buy a piece of equipment, an electronic piece of equipment that's B Goods, it may actually be a better piece of equipment than if it was a regular, what would you call it, A Goods, I guess, because when it comes back to the manufacturer, they take some additional pains to make sure that the piece is really as good as a brand new, never used, never factory opened piece of equipment. So you never know. And that BA6A, Jerry, I think you probably remember I bought that thing for, I think it was $35 back in 1979 from Lynn Schneider, who was the chief engineer at WALK. And I put it up on eBay a little over 2 years ago, and that thing sold for about $6,400. The price of those things is totally off the wall. There's a characteristic that the recording studio guys love, that peak limiter has, and I just never look back. I really, for that kind of money, you can have it. It's like the kind of money that Western Electric audio equipment goes for nowadays. It's just totally off the wall. So that was the end of my BA6A. I had that thing for many, many years, never had a problem with it. Changed out a couple of tubes over time, and it just got to the point where it was just worth too much to run the risk that what if a power transformer or an audio transformer should fail, then the thing becomes worthless. So while it was still running good, I let it go for that price, and that's the end of it. I got a question for you, Frank. You might know this. There was another ham, I think in your neck of the woods. I think he was in South Jersey. Had a W2 call. I can't remember his name. I'd have to go digging through the old station logs here. Was active on AM here on 75, 80 meters. He had a homebrew linear amplifier. I think he used a 3CX3000 in the final. I mean, that thing was a monstrous amplifier. Put out a powerful signal, beautiful sounding signal, using linear amplification of low-level AM. I haven't heard that guy on the radio in a number of years. I'm sure if you mention the call or the name, it'll immediately trigger my memory. And thanks for the signal report. Minus 40 dBm. Okay, 40 dB below a milliwatt. W2SDR and the group. I think you get it. Forgive me for not remembering the order again. This is W2XR.
That's okay. I want to see if David's still listening. Are you listening, David? Yeah, he had asked about hitting the bass line and all the rest of this, and I didn't want to go into the whole thing unless he was listening. Because I know you guys know all about that, so we'll do that compendium another time. W2SDR. Very interesting, guys, on some of this old equipment. The BA6A compressor. I just checked on eBay. The meter for that compressor is $315 on eBay. Just the meter. All this stuff is going completely out of sight. And it's a whole new, whether it's worth it or not seems not even to be relevant. I looked yesterday. I have some Dynaco equipment here I haven't used in a number of years. Tube equipment, stereo ST70, PAT3X preamp. And the only reason I really don't use it much is because it doesn't have remote control. I'd have to get up to switch the inputs and volume and what have you. Well, it came up in a QSO I had on sideband last night about this equipment. I just happened to look on eBay. You would not believe what this stuff is going for. That preamp is anywhere between $500 and $1,000. I think I paid $100 for it, $100 and some dollars in kit form way back in the day. It's just the stuff has taken on a life of its own. I mean, it was nice stuff. I couldn't wait in a lot of ways to upgrade from, Dynaco stuff was entry level. That's what it was. I mean, I was there when it was out and current. And until you can upgrade to get like Macintosh or Marantz. But now it's like supposedly, oh my God, Dynaco is like the best thing that there ever was. Well, it's all cool. It's all very interesting. I don't know who you're talking about, Bruce, with the 3CX3000, unless I had a call. I'm new to New Jersey, guys, basically. I've only been over here for 19 years. So, I don't know a lot of the really old-timers. Let me see what else. Bellar, of course, you got some really good stuff, Bruce. Really, quality equipment. That stuff there is like professional broadcast equipment, the Bellar stuff. And I would hope that if you had to contact them for anything, that they would be very, very helpful. I used to drool over their mod monitors. Back in the day, I guess before I was looking for one used, and I guess I ended up buying the REA mod monitor here, which Steve's monitor works very, very well, but the Bellar stuff is very, very, very nice, very nice. As far as the B goods, that's a good point, that the stuff would be checked extra. That's a very good point. I never even thought of it like that. Oh, before I forget, both of you guys, one of the main benefits why I got rid of my 222s, I had two of them and bought the 223, is that it has adjustable bandwidth with the knob right on the front. And that was a big drawback of the 222. I mean, this has multiple bandwidths, I think 5, 7, 9, NTSC, straight through, FM, and just with the turn of a knob. So that was a big plus. It's nice to have the extra bandwidth without, changing like 27 or 50 some parts on the inside. Back she comes to you. I guess David's gone. Back to you, Jerry. WA2FNQ, W2SDR.
I love it. Very good, Frank. W2SDR from WA2FNQ. Very good. Well, I get a few comments. Not the price of that, but you're right. And anything that says Western Electric on it, goes for huge bucks. I have a friend in Connecticut that had this beat-up Western Electric mixer. Dented, and it was really, you look at it and you'd probably throw it in the garbage, and he put it up on eBay and it went for $1,200. And you say, well, basically it was a banged up panel that said Western Electric on it. It's ridiculous. Outside you see the EXOs going for big bucks like that. And you're right, you sold it while it still had value. If you wound up smoking a transformer or something, then you're right, it'd be a useless piece of junk at that point. Although, you know what, I bet you if you put that thing up on eBay, even if it was non-working, I bet you'd get some money for it. But yeah, the one we had at GLI was really good. I think it's just something that that he had in there. I have the carcass of that thing over here, but he was doing multi-band processing before some of the other guys were doing it. So what interesting piece of gear. Anyway, and I got the schematic for it around here someplace. He scribbled it on a piece of yellow notepad. Very innovative, and to tell you the truth, it actually worked okay. But Elliot pulled it out of line. He's like, why don't you put more controls on it? And their answer to that was because you could drive it at NRSC spec. And like I said before, the 222 was mainly a unit that broadcast stations could slip in their audio chains, make them NRSC compliant. Because you wouldn't be compliant. The thing was just made for that one real purpose. It's a great little limiter. I love the one down here. It'll definitely slam you down and keep you from little monster. But that was their whole basis and purpose for building the 222. It was meant to just make your station. That's probably why they have something like the 723 now. They have the option to say so anyway. Forgot what else I wanted to comment on. So anyway, all right, Dave's out of it. Got it, Bruce. WA1SOV. Are you there? This is WA2FNQ in the booth.
Nah, I guess he's still gone. WA2FNQ in the group from W2XR. Very good. Yeah, it's interesting, Frank, what you mentioned about the BA6A meter on eBay. I'll tell you, you're not going to believe this. Pardon me. As I mentioned, at BA6A, I sold that, I think it was December of 2016. That thing sold for $6,400. So the guy sends me an email once he gets the unit, and he's, very happy with it and whatnot. He leaves me the positive feedback. And he says to me, do you have anything else that's related to the BA6A? And I said to him, it's funny you mention that, because I was at a ham fest about 25 years ago, and I picked up a spare meter for the BA6A. And I said, I also have, and I've never used it, the wiring gutter that's mounted on the back of the BA6A. I didn't include that with the auction. I just forgot about it. So he says to me, well, would you be interested in selling both of them? And I said, for sure. So I sold the meter for $300, and the wiring gutter or wiring trough, whatever you want to call it, I sold that for another $125. So I guess, all in, that BA6A went for close to $7,000. And I never looked back, like I said. With this old equipment, and it's true of any of the stuff that we're running, like this R390A or my R390, or, a transformer could fail. This equipment is 50, 60, 70 years old, and replacement parts may not be all that available. And when you're dealing with a piece of equipment like the RCA BA6A, originality to these guys is everything. I think that's why the thing went for the price that it did. The only thing I had ever replaced in that, aside from a couple of tubes, was the meter zero set potentiometer. That was getting a little noisy. Everything else in that thing was original. All the capacitors for the circuit, even in the power supply, everything was bone stock original. And but if some of this stuff should poop out, particularly like an audio transformer, you could have a real problem. So I'm glad it's gone. And as far as the Western Electric equipment goes, that stuff had no value up until maybe the late 1970s, when the Japanese developed this fascination with Western Electric audio gear. And the reason for that really stems from the fact that Western Electric was really the company who had developed and pioneered high-fidelity audio, primarily, of course, for movie soundtracks, talkies, back in the late 20s, early 1930s. They developed the whole thing. They developed the recording technology. They recorded the reproduction technology. They developed the very high-efficiency horn-loaded loudspeakers that were necessary to get realistic and satisfying sound pressure levels in a large venue, like a 3,000-seat movie theater. Very low distortion, wide bandwidth audio amplifiers, preamplifiers. They did the whole thing, soup to nuts. And RCA, of course, was right behind them. So the Japanese were the ones that developed this fascination with the collectability of this vintage WE equipment, and it's just gone from there. There are some Western Electric tubes, like a Western Electric 300B, that, depending upon the vintage, can sell for over $4,000, $5,000 a piece. A basic triode power tube. So you never know. And I still have my original Dynaco Stereo 70, Frank, and Jerry remembers it. I built it when I was in college. I built it, I think, in 1973. Haven't used it in many, many years. I keep it safely boxed up. I have still two I only have one of the PAS-3X preamps. I use that in a monaural sound system that we have in our living room with an Altec 606 corner enclosure with an Altec 604 duplex driver located inside of it. And it was good equipment. I mean, it was, for the value, for the price, you got tremendous value. It was reliable. They sounded good. There are many people, believe it or not, who think that the Stereo 70 was a better sounding amplifier than some of the Macintosh amplifiers like the MC240, the MC275, which I personally always found to be very boomy, tubby sounding equipment. But nobody can dispute the beauty of the old Macintosh vacuum tube equipment. It was the Harley Davidson of audio gear with the black and chrome chassis and whatnot. Beautiful looking equipment. And interesting about the 223 having the bandwidth adjustment on the front panel. If I remember, and I'm going to have to pull the file on my 222, I think there were a series of jumpers on the circuit board in the 222 that enabled you to configure the desired bandwidth. And I think mine is set up for 12.5 kilohertz, if that sounds familiar. Again, I set the thing up when I first installed it, and I never did anything to it aside from adjusting it upon the time of installation, and I've left the thing alone. It's never given me any problems. So the ability to change the bandwidth on the front panel of the 223, that's a nice feature. But again, I think it's the kind of thing I would set it once and kind of leave it alone. I really set the bandwidth of my transmitted signal on the basis of where I set the graphic EQ. Everything else I prefer to leave wide open. And I remember that Gates SA39 peak limiter at WGSM. That's another peak limiter that's very much in demand. You know, I had another peak limiter too. It was made by Collins. I picked it up at a flea market probably about 15 years ago. I think I paid $100 for it. It was a 26U, all vacuum tube. Nice piece of equipment. I didn't like the way it sounded though compared to the BA6. So again, I put the thing up on eBay and it went for I think $3,200 or something. And again, somebody else can have it. It was the technology of its day. The 222 for a plate modulated transmitter, or the 223, just blow those things totally out of the water. But you wouldn't want to use a 222 in a audio chain in a recording studio. So, you know, different application, different hardware. W2SDR and the group. I think my wife just came home. This is W2XR.
Alrighty, W2XR, the group, W2SDR. This has been, I guess, one of the most enjoyable Q-shows I've had in quite some time here on the band. You know, it's right up my alley on all this stuff. And both of you guys are a wealth of information. Oh, I don't know where to start here. Before I forget, I'm a big fan of film noir movies, and tonight there's an exceptional double feature on TCM starting at 8 o'clock. That genre of black and white film noir is one of my favorite genres of movies. So there's a double feature tonight, special attraction starting at 8. Well, the Japanese guys, of course, they're into all that vintage stuff. Vintage motorcycles, vintage hi-fi equipment. They'll pay big bucks for the old JBL stuff, the Altec stuff. I've had Altec Voice of the Theaters here over the years. I just sold about a few years ago my JBL L300 horn driver, loudspeaker systems. I still have some JBL studio monitors here that I use on a regular basis. Now my ST70 guys and my PS3 3X, which is 3X is the one that is worth the most money, I would think. It's got those special tone control configuration for whatever reason. I didn't think it was anything special when I put it together. I put it together as a kid, but because it was cheap. And it worked good, but, you know, apparently it's worth a lot now. But I have rebuilt both of those units to put new glass epoxy circuit boards in there. And especially the circuit board that was in the ST70. They were really crappy boards. Those fiber boards, I put glass epoxy boards and repopulated the boards with brand new components, ceramic tube sockets, everything. and it really upgraded the unit because those boards, high resistance shorts, the traces were, that was horrible. Tube sockets on printed circuit boards were just a disaster waiting to happen. That era where they would do that was just a terrible era in electronics, in my opinion. Tubes and circuit boards do not mix. Well, you're an expert for you guys on these prices of this vintage stuff, on these old tubes and what have you, 300Bs for like thousands of dollars. And but the Japanese and the Asians will pay that kind of money, man. They love that stuff. MC240s, Macintosh, I had two of them at one time. They're both gone. I sold them to buy the latest and greatest phase linear solid-state amplifiers when they became popular. I don't even want to say what I sold that stuff for. But it's gone. The MC275 is still in the Macintosh line. We still make them. Still sell them. I forget how much they are. They're a lot of money. Of course, they don't give anything away. As far as I know, the 222s never had adjustable bandwidth, jumpers or otherwise. None of mine ever did. And I bought one of them new 6-7 years ago. None of that was jumpers. You had to change a lot of resistors and a few capacitors to change the bandwidth. I have this 223 set at 5kC right now. 5kC audio bandwidth, plus or minus 5. So that's what I usually keep this 223 set at for my 751 here, as well as my FT101 stations. So I guess I'll stay in here for one more, guys. And I think I commented on everything. Really enjoyed it. Jerry, your signal really came up. In the last transmission, you were close to 40 over. Close to 40 over 9. Both of you guys, very, very definition of armchair copy. WA2FNQ in the group, W2SDR.
N9PDF, back from the dead.